Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Caleb McAllister here. Thank you guys for joining. I hope you are doing extremely well today. I am on the road as per usual. Obviously, in my line of work, I spend a lot of time traveling to teach, whether privates or seminars, to train, to compete, and so on. So we are doing today's live stream on the road, and I look forward to getting to spend some time with you. Today, of course, is martial arts talk, and our main focus will be primarily on the upcoming CJI and ADCC tournaments, which are now just a handful of days away. We're going to mostly focus on CJI competitors, mostly in the minus 80 category, and we will see how far we get beyond that, but that division on its own is so insanely stacked that we may not get much farther than that. That being said, of course, these podcasts are yours, so if you have something specific that you want to talk about in the martial arts world, please let me know, and I'll be happy to talk about it. Before we go any farther, please let me draw attention to today's featured brand, which is Fasted Athlete. I'm currently holding their Lift, which is an incredible nootropic supplement that I've had the opportunity to try recently. If you know me, you know I am not a big supplements guy, or at least I'm very suspicious of the quality of the supplements that I do try, and I have been incredibly impressed with Lift. So check it out at the link below. You can also look at some of their other products, such as colostrum, etc., that you can add to your routine, and I will talk about that more as we go. So with no further ado, obviously brackets for CJI were released not too long ago. I assume many of you have had a chance to take a look at those. Obviously, always a chance of some things changing in the days to come, whether somebody gets injured or drops out or what have you. But as things stand, I would say the first and most obvious people that we should discuss in the CJI Craig Jones Invitational minus 80 bracket for $1 million coming up this weekend would be the Ruotolo brothers. Obviously, that goes without saying. Cade Ruotolo being the reigning world champion from ADCC. That was a massive get for Craig for CJI to kind of poach the reigning world champion. And of course, you know, the fans can go back and forth on which of the brothers is better, and they are pretty damn near clones of each other, being twins. If you watch them train, it's hard to say who is actually better. They have extremely similar styles, very submission hunting heavy, very scrambly, a lot of wrestle jitsu. They can play bottom, they can play top. Good leg locks, extremely good darces, very, very opportunistic, where you only have to make a small split-second mistake and they will make you pay for it. They are, you know, able to kind of capture lightning in a bottle at the drop of a hat when it comes to winning a match almost instantaneously. So I think most people would say, I don't know if they're both the favorite, but certainly I think most people would bet that one of them is very likely to be the person who takes home the top prize of $1 million. And if you had to put money on it, maybe you would say Cade, simply because he's the reigning world champ, but it's really difficult to pick one or the other. And the fact that they are on opposite sides of the bracket is particularly interesting, simply because they could very well wind up facing each other in the finals, and that wouldn't be shocking, I don't think, to anyone. It's also interesting considering that they have competed against each other a number of times. They are not believers in closing out. They will beat the absolute hell out of each other if they do wind up in the finals, which would of course be extremely entertaining to watch. Those two brothers go to war for $1 million, and I imagine they would use that to continue to build their gym. I believe that they just started in is it Costa Rica, if I'm remembering correctly. But you know they're still going to beat the snot out of each other if that does happen regardless. Now, if I remember correctly, Cade's first opponent in the first round is Jason Nolf, who I think most people would say is one of the biggest wild cards, I guess you could say, of the CJI tournament. Jason Nolf, of course, being, if I remember correctly, a 3-time NCAA national champion wrestler. There's very, very few better wrestlers on the planet than Jason Nolf. He's not unfamiliar with jiu-jitsu, with submission grappling. If I remember correctly, I think he's a purple belt, if I'm not mistaken. I know he trains jiu-jitsu pretty extensively at this point and has really gotten extremely good at blending his jiu-jitsu with his incredible, elite black belt level wrestling, if you want to call it that. You still got to wonder, like, an unbelievable wrestler who's also a pretty good jiu-jitsu guy, is that going to cut it against some of the best submission grapplers in the world? Like, obviously, nobody can wrestle with him. So, a jiu-jitsu guy who has a wrestling style and has no other path to victory is going to have a unbelievably hard time finding a way to win against a guy like Jason Nolf. Like, there's nobody in the tournament who can out-wrestle him. Like, let's just call a spade a spade. But I think this level of guy is going to know that. Like, they understand what's the smartest path to victory versus a guy like Jason. Now, if Cade and Jason are the first round matchup, obviously Cade has very solid wrestling. He's, I wouldn't say, like, pretty technical traditional wrestling, but it is freaking effective wrestling in submission grappling. So, do you think Cade's going to wrestle with Jason? It wouldn't shock me. I don't think he expects to beat Jason at the wrestling, but I think he's going to try to make him do just enough wrestling to kind of get into wrestling mode and forget about the threat of the submission. He's going to try to catch him slipping on his submission defense, trying to finish a takedown. Whether it's leaving the neck exposed and locking in a darce, whether it's allowing Cade to invert underneath and come out on a leg, maybe come up into 50-50, something along those lines. I think it's going to be very hard for a guy like Jason to not flip that switch into, I'm going to win the wrestling, when he's faced with a guy who's going to, at least on the surface, give him a little bit of a wrestling threat. Now, by threat, I don't mean that Cade could beat him in a, freestyle, folk style, collegiate wrestling match, but I mean that he's going to throw enough of a threat at him that Jason has to kind of prove who the real wrestler is. And I feel like once he does that, that's what Cade wants, and he's going to find a way to latch onto a neck, latch onto an arm, latch onto a leg. It's an interesting matchup, and it wouldn't shock me to see the absolutely insane, huge upset of seeing the world champion somehow get taken out by decision if he gets taken down and controlled a few times in each round. Not to mention the fact that in the sloped pit that CJI is using, there is very little in the way of takedown defense, especially if you back up. Like, you have to be engaging, you have to be moving forward, because you cannot sprawl against the sloped walls of the pit, or I believe the alley, if I remember right, is what they're calling it. So we'll see. I don't see Cade doing kind of like a traditional, like, Mikey Musumeci, like, sit down, pull guard, butt scoot kind of an approach. I think Cade's going to try to scramble and recognize that he's going to lose the takedown battle, but that he's going to try to find a way to find his openings for his submissions in those exchanges. My guess would be that Cade probably locks up his darce in there somewhere, more than likely. But you never know. If Jason sells out to not allow him to get on his neck, which would be smart, and he's not clueless on the jiu-jitsu by any means, he's a good jiu-jitsu guy for sure, then it's going to be pretty challenging for him to not allow Cade access to his legs. You can't defend both ends of the body at the same time. If you're trying to keep your legs out of reach, you have to allow access to your head and to your arms. If you were trying to keep your posture up and away, you have to leave access to your legs available, and I'm expecting Cade to play that dilemma pretty effectively and probably find a way to lock something up. I would say more than likely in the first 5 minutes, but if Jason plays smart and cagey and a little bit more defensive, a little bit less exciting than I would expect, then I could see it going a little bit farther, and hey, you never know. There is absolutely a path for Jason to win that match. I would not put money on it, but there's a path for Jason to win that match. Let me know you guys' thoughts on all of these breakdowns. I am simply giving you guys my 2 cents worth, of course, and anything can happen in combat sports. That's why we watch the matches. Again, thank you to Fasted Athlete for supporting today's broadcast. Like I said, I've been taking their Lift supplement for quite a while now. It's a really impressive, really high quality nootropic that I've really been impressed with. So please check them out at the link below, and thank them for being today's featured brand and for their support of Martial Arts Talk. Alright, so who else do we want to talk about? Obviously, you could say a lot of the same compliments that you say towards Cade, towards Ty. They have very similar styles. Obviously, they've both won an incredible number of events, and there's a million different what-ifs, etc. for how that can go. Who else do we want to talk about? Roberto Jimenez. He's another interesting... I don't know if wild card is the right word, because he's won, obviously, a massive number of things in jiu-jitsu. He gave Nicky Rod, who is substantially larger, a pretty good match. I believe that was on WNO not that long ago, as I recall. He's capable of beating anybody. He's proven that. He's also lost a number of times in somewhat unexpected fashion, primarily to leg locks. Now, it's kind of a exaggeration to say that, he just has no leg lock defense, because he's going against the best guys in the world, and you leave one tiny opening, and there's always going to be a chance of something get locked up. But I don't think anybody would argue that the most likely path to catch Jimenez is going to be to go after his legs. That being said, I mean, obviously there's a ton of great leg lockers in the bracket, but leaving that out of it, there's nobody that Jimenez isn't capable of beating. He's an exciting guy. He's great scrambles, very good submission awareness in most situations, barring those few leg lock losses that he's taken. I wouldn't say that there's a ton of guys that their entire game is nothing but hunting legs, like a Jacob Couch, for example. Obviously, he does other weapons too, but obviously he's by far most known for hunting legs. So, I wouldn't pick him, but I feel like he's a solid underdog pick. Like, I know there's some people who are like, man, Jimenez could win this whole thing, and it's absolutely a possibility. It wouldn't shock me. Like I said, not my personal bet for who I would say is one of the top one or two most likely guys. But if I was in a coma and I woke up and was like, hey, who won the Craig Jones Invitational, and you told me it was Jimenez, I wouldn't be like, no way, I could never have guessed that. Like, it could happen. It absolutely could happen. You never know. But it's going to be fun to watch. That's the point. Oh, this is a very interesting matchup. Andy Varela and Joseph Chen. Another really exciting first-round matchup. Like, some of these first-round matchups, they're coming on early, and they could have easily been, like, semifinal or even final round matchups. And I would say Varela versus Chen is absolutely one of those. That's one of the first-round matchups that I am most looking forward to, for sure. Varela is a absolute handful for anybody. As good as his wrestling is, as good as his sub-hunting is, as explosive and athletic as he is much like the Rotolos, much like the Tackett's. He's kind of the prototype of what modern submission grappling looks like. The wrestle jitsu, where you can play top, you can play bottom, you can play guard, you can play the feet, you can play the clinch, you can shoot. He's dangerous everywhere. There's not an obvious path to victory versus a guy like Andy Varela. And I think that his game is particularly suited for this rule set. That being said, like, Joseph Chen, man, he has been blowing me away for a long time now, just in terms of how good he looks. Every time he gets out there, he's better. He's like a computer who's just downloading information and doing it perfectly almost immediately. There's been a number of matchups that he's had recently where I expected him to really, really struggle. Probably give a good account of himself, but maybe not come out on top. Like, if you watch his last ADCC trials run, and he just smoked everybody. And to be frank, I did not see that coming. Like, I knew he was dangerous. I knew he was good. I've been following him for a while, but I didn't think he was quite ready for that level yet. And he most definitely proved me wrong. He looked not only like he belonged, he looked like head and shoulders above the rest of the field. And these were some elite level guys that he beat. So we'll see. That Andy Varela versus Joseph Chen one, that's a matchup that I would not want to have to pick a winner on, and would not want to have to put money on, because I think both of those guys, if whoever gets past the other, has a very real shot to make it to the finals and potentially even win the finals. I think Varela is a little bit more explosive, a little bit faster, probably a little bit stronger, more athletic. Joseph Chen a little bit more tactical, a little bit more technical possibly, maybe doesn't take quite as many chances. So I could see him being patient and smart and trying to catch Varela a little bit overextended, a little bit overcommitted, something, just a tiny bit out of position, whether it gives up a back take or lets him lock up an arm or something along those lines. So if I had to pick, I'm almost leaning towards Chen, but this would be a real kind of like crowning of an up-and-coming elite if he can win that matchup, but let alone if he can make it to the finals or even potentially win the entire bracket. But I think that's one of the toughest picks, and that's definitely a very tough first-round matchup for both of these guys. Not the toughest first-round matchup, but most definitely one of them, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. Before we go any further, I want to show you guys what these capsules look like from the Fasted Athlete Lift supplement, which I already took a little bit earlier. Like I said, really clean, natural, high-quality nootropic that I've been really impressed with. I want to thank them for their support of today's broadcast as today's featured brand. Please check them out below. Let me know if you have any questions, etc. Let's see, who else do we have to talk about here? Obviously, I'm not getting to everybody, and I apologize to all the incredible martial artists that deserve time and energy and attention on today's broadcast. We will not be able to get to everybody, but they are all absolutely incredible, and they all very much deserve to be there. Renato Canuto, that's another, versus Tommy Langecker. That's another really interesting matchup. I'd say Canuto and Varela have some similarities in terms of their style. That would be another really fascinating matchup to watch. Majid Hage versus Owen O'Flanagan. If you saw the B-Team, I think it was the Simple Men podcast, where they discussed the pronunciation of his name. It is definitely not spelled as we typically spell it here in the U.S., but it is pronounced Owen O'Flanagan. Owen being an incredible leg locker. Majid, however, being an absolute monster himself. He's had incredible ADCC trials runs. Yours truly, I had a match with him a couple of years ago. He did manage to get the edge on me, one that I've been not thrilled with myself about ever since. That was a very close match that I should not have let get away from me right at the end there. But hey, hats off to Majid. He's a killer, and he's capable of beating anybody. Owen O'Flanagan is a very tough matchup, though, being a nasty leg locker. That's going to be a very dangerous matchup. You're going to have to play that one extremely tactically. And Majid, I'm not saying he's not a good leg locker, but it's not what he's most known for. So I could see that match being maybe one of the slightly less exciting ones, because it's just going to have to be so carefully played. And I think both of those guys know their paths to victory on that one, and that could be a challenge to talk about. Now, the last first round matchup that I want to talk about is, in my opinion, the hardest first round matchup. And I think a ton of people said this could have been the finals, and I 100% agree. Especially if you leave the Rotolos out of it. I think everyone's going to say, well, if the Rotolos weren't the finals, who would you think are probably the two most likely guys to make it? It's these guys. Andrew Tackett and Nicky Ryan. Obviously, there's no guarantees. If the brackets had shaken out differently, it could have gone very different. But two of the guys that absolutely have the tools to win the $1 million prize in this entire tournament, and they got wound up matching in the first round, which is incredible. I mean, it's tough for both of them to have that hard of a match right out the gate. But for those of us who are watching as fans, I mean, hey, that's a matchup that we would love to see and are very, very much looking forward to. I've been a huge fan of the Tackett brothers for a very long time. William, Andrew, and I believe Caleb is the younger brother who's coming up as well. They are, like I said, that wrestle jitsu prototype. They've kind of been at the forefront of that. The scrambles, the sub-hunting, great leg locks, great back takes, really, really good back takes from Andrew Tackett. Just so opportunistic. We've seen him beat some guys who are just far bigger and stronger. He has cardio for days. I've never seen him get tired, no matter how challenging or large, strong of an opponent he's been faced with. He can put an absolute pace on anyone, and as soon as you start to get a little bit tired and make a little bit of a mistake, he's going to make you pay for it. That being said, Nicky Ryan, the brother of the famous, notorious Gordon Ryan, he's been kind of the crown prince for a long time when it comes to the world of professional grappling. He is one of the most talented, mentally tactical minds in jiu-jitsu. You watch him coach, you watch him train. He is absolutely incredible. Now, he's never quite lived up to what everybody who knows him says is his potential. And there's a couple of reasons for that. I think a lot of it being due to injuries. He's had several very significant injuries that have interfered with his training. And as a result, when you see him out there, there's been times that he has looked, well, a little bit handicapped, that he's not quite what many of us know he's capable of being, whether it's because he's moving a little bit more slowly, whether it's because he's a little bit ginger in some of his movements, whether it's because he is limited in the positions that his injuries or that his body will allow him to play, so he has to kind of narrow the range of arsenal that he's able to use. And not only that, even when he is relatively healthy, his cardio has never been his strong suit. And that may not be because of him not training hard enough. It may be because of the injuries. If that handicaps how hard he's able to train, how hard he's able to push his cardio, that could have a substantial impact on how he performs out under the lights. That being said, we have seen flashes of just how incredible Nicky Ryan is capable of being. And most recently, there was a fantastic example of that when he defeated the legendary JT Torres by submission. He actually finished him. JT being a multiple-time world ADCC champion, that's a huge win, not just to get the win, but to get the win by submission. That's, I would say, the biggest win of Nicky Ryan's career, and he looked fantastic. So I think it's very possible that things are kind of starting to come together for him, that he's getting healthy, that he's able to kind of rely on his body the way that he needs it to, and as a result that his cardio is going to also be there to a greater extent than it has been in the past. And like I said, if you watch him in training, he's looking really, really good, even against some of the best guys in the world, and he's toying with them. So I don't think, much like we talked about with Jimenez, etc., I don't think there's anybody who would be shocked if Nicky Ryan was the guy to win this at the end of the day. That being said, we've seen him go out earlier, say in last ADCCs, than we would have ever expected. So there's times that he looks incredible, and there's times that he looks surprisingly pedestrian. And against Andrew Tackett, you have to be absolute razor sharp. I have a hard time picking Nicky, a guy who has shown that his cardio can be a weakness, against a guy like Andrew Tackett, who has proven a million times that not only is his cardio not a weakness, but that he is one of the best in professional grappling at weaponizing pace, at pushing his opponent's cardio so hard that they start to make mistakes. I don't think there's any question that will be his game plan, or at least a big part of his game plan versus Nicky, is make him sprint. Make him get tired. Because you're not going to win a technique match early on with Nicky Ryan. You're just not. I would be shocked to see Andrew Tackett catch him in a technique versus technique exchange in the first minute or two. Could it happen? Absolutely. But if you were going to say, if this is a slow, methodical, technical match, who's better? I would pick Nicky. That being said, I think Andrew is going to go, okay, but my cardio, I believe, is far, far better than yours, so I'm going to make you sprint the entire match. And we're going to see how good your technique is when you start to suck wind, when you start to gasp for air, when your heart rate is racing 1,000,000 miles an hour, and I'm still cool as a cucumber. So on paper, I think Nicky is more technical. But functionally, that cardio gap makes me really nervous about picking Nicky. I would have picked Nicky against most of the field. But we'll see. He's got to know, I mean, the matchups have been announced. Obviously, he's got to know that that's the question is, can his cardio hold up? If his cardio can't hold up, Andrew Tackett's going to take this. If his cardio can hold up, Nicky, I would say, most likely would. But until I've seen Nicky's cardio hold up under the kind of pressure that Tackett can bring, knowing that that is Nicky's Achilles heel, if I had to bet money, I would put it on Tackett. And that might be shocking because it's freaking Nicky Ryan and he is incredible. And I could very well be wrong on that. But, man, cardio is king. Conditioning is king. Especially in a matchup like this where nobody's going to be tapping to absolutely anything that they can possibly avoid with $1 million on the line. I don't know. That's my pick. We'll see. But it's going to be absolutely fascinating to watch. I am so freaking excited to see where this goes. And that's just the first round matchups. So I'm definitely going to be getting back on here to talk more as we get to the results and to kind of break down what happened and how it happened and what our thoughts were. Like I said, please let me know what you guys are thinking in the future, both before and after the tournament. I would love to hear your thoughts. I hope you guys enjoyed that brief look at some of the highlights of round one. Obviously, there is much more that we can get into, but we'll call it there for today. Thank you again to Fasted Athlete for their lift, colostrum, etc. supplements for being today's featured brand. You guys are awesome. Please check them out at the link below. Support the show. That being said, until next time, I am Caleb McAllister. I appreciate you guys being here. Have a fantastic day, and I will see you next time. Take care, guys.